everyone, my name is Rebecca and welcome back to... Okay, I gotta take this thing off, it doesn't feel right. So today we're doing the big thematic analysis that we've been building up to for the entire 48 episode run so far. For those of you who haven't really taken any literature courses, a thematic analysis is basically looking at a work to find its meaning. It's why I love analyzing stories. I like to see storytelling as a form of communication where if you try hard enough, you can find exactly what the writer is telling you and all of the ways that they've done it. You might already be able to guess that this entire series has actually already been a thematic analysis the entire time. Surprise! I've used a variety of methods, from analyzing narrative events and the overall narrative structure, the actions and motivations of characters, explaining the use of mirror characters throughout the show, several forms of symbolism, and even done some contextual analysis by looking at the history of these characters, from the stories themselves to the events that were happening while they were being written, like the trial of Oscar Wilde, some other versions of these stories and how they might have influenced, like the private life of Sherlock Holmes, other potential influences on the story, such as The Princess Bride, and of course the backgrounds of the two people who have created this show, and how all of these things impact their version. All of these things lead to one clearly resounding message that Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat want to get across with BBC Sherlock. The story of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson has always been a love story. That's the theme. And there is a crucial difference between them wanting to convey that it has always been a love story, as opposed to them just telling it as an interesting version. It gives the writers a greater passion for what they're doing. And we can tell that they see it this way most clearly from the end of The Abominable Bride, starting from when they rewrite a famous moment to include John, saying he always should have been there.
Shall we go over together? It has to be together, doesn't it? At the end, it's always just you and me!
Professor, if you wouldn't mind stepping away from my friend, I do believe he finds your attention a shade annoying.
That's not fair, there's two of you.
There's always two of us. Don't you read the Strand?
It gets most direct in the final scene, where Holmes describes BBC Sherlock as his idea of the future and where he and Watson fit inside of it.
Flying machines, these telephone contraptions? What sort of lunatic fantasy is that?
It was simply my conjecture of what a future world might look like and how you and I might fit inside it.
And he longs for the future because he and Watson were made as men out of their time.
Perhaps I was being a little fanciful. But perhaps such things could come to pass. In any case, I know I would be very much at home in such a world.
Don't think I would be.
I beg to differ. But then I've always known I was a man out of his time.
That's what this show is about. It's finally revealing the true story of their relationship. Even the latest trailer hinted that we've been building up to a secret love story the entire time.
Tell them your darkest secret.
I love you.
And they have even explicitly stated their motivation. Not saying it was about a romance, of course, but they've made it clear that they're making this version because they think everyone else has been getting something crucial about Holmes wrong. This wasn't a case of, let's grab that off the shelf and update it. It was, we love this, we think everyone's been getting it wrong, and we think we can get it right. Unless you think you're correcting everyone else who shouldn't be doing something. You should be saying, now this is the way it should be done. They wouldn't even be making the show if they didn't think they were correcting everyone else. And the only thing that could be about is about John and Sherlock's relationship, because that is what everything in the story points towards. So at this point you may be asking yourself why I had to cover M-theory before making this video if it isn't directly related to that central message. And this is what I've been looking forward to talking about for months, and is the biggest revelation that I've had about the show in the course of making these videos. When I began to notice M-theory being hinted at in the show, and then finally got around to reading it earlier this year, I was asking myself a similar question. Why would they include this intricate plot as the undercurrent shaping the events of the entire narrative if it really didn't have much to do with John and Sherlock's relationship? Moriarty's motivations do, but him using Mycroft and Magnuson and sending in the people he does, there seemed to be something interconnected about what Moriarty was doing, and I didn't understand why they would include it when it really isn't their style to do something like this for its own sake. It took me a couple of weeks of puzzling it over, but then I remembered the quote I just read to you, along with dozens of small choices they've made for Moriarty and the rest of the antagonists, and suddenly everything clicked. It was about John and Sherlock's relationship. More importantly, it was about the story of getting that relationship told. It's them correcting everyone else. We have to start this by establishing what Moriarty actually represents. The writers make it obvious right away. How is Moriarty introduced? No, not with the flirting in the pool, or dressing up extra gay in the lab, or for calling Sherlock sexy over the phone, or even the Mycroft red herring. Jefferson Hope the cabbie is the first character to introduce Moriarty to the story, and he does it in a very specific way.
Sherlock Holmes. I was warned about you. I've been on your website too. Brilliant stuff. Loved it.
Who warned you about me?
Got yourself a fan.
In case the one time wasn't obvious enough, the episode repeats this idea 2 more times.
I'd sponsor a serial killer.
You'd be a fan of Sherlock Holmes.
Your sponsor. Who was it? The one who told you about me, my fan. I want a name.
Moriarty is introduced as a fan of Sherlock Holmes. Remember, they think everyone else has been getting it wrong. And so they made those other Holmes fans the main antagonist. Moriarty has been obsessed with Sherlock Holmes since childhood, and thinks Sherlock is this clever, unfeeling machine, which makes them perfect for each other. He hates any evidence to the contrary and tries to destroy that part of Sherlock. He wants to make Sherlock realize that he doesn't need his emotions. He likes Sherlock better when he's focusing on the cases and puzzles. He especially hates John Watson and the idea that Sherlock is in love with him. It's really funny that they've written this kind of Holmes fan as having a romantic obsession with Holmes, especially because it would infuriate them if they ever caught on to it. It's a good thing for them that they won't. Maybe they will now, because I've made this. You Holmes fans, they're dragging you. They're calling you out. That's not all, though. In the Reichenbach Fall, the writers explicitly confirm Moriarty's other role in the story.
I'm the storyteller. I'm the storyteller. It's on DVD.
He's the storyteller. He's the one making all those inaccurate Holmes adaptations. He's even selling a giant lie about Sherlock to the press in this very episode. I've said before that we can summarize the effect Moriarty has on the narrative as things keeping Sherlock and John apart. And that is exactly what he represents in the story. He's everything that has kept Holmes and Watson apart for 130 years. Particularly the fans who have misunderstood Holmes, and the people making the versions that were about cases, not the relationship. Why did the writers pick Moriarty for this? Well, for starters, he is the most well-known Holmes villain, and so if they were looking for a single overarching foe, he would be the most obvious choice. But there is another reason, one that they pointed out in The Abominable Bride. In 1893, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had grown tired of publishing the Holmes stories, and so created Professor Moriarty for the sole purpose of killing off Holmes. At the end of the story, Moriarty leads Watson away using a fake decoy, and then apparently goes over the Reichenbach Falls with Holmes, leaving Watson heartbroken. We've talked before about how there are plenty of reasons to believe that Doyle was telling as blatant of a love story as he could at the time, so he might have decided to kill off Holmes because he was frustrated at not really being able to tell the story he wanted to. Moriarty then could be seen as a manifestation of Doyle's frustration at not being able to have Sherlock Holmes and John Watson be together, so he used Moriarty to rip them apart once and for all. The BBC writers clearly think it's time to change that story, and they've made it clear that they don't think that should have happened in the first place.
That's not fair. There's 2 of you.
There's always 2 of us. Don't you read the Strand? It was my turn.
Good, sir.
So that establishes what Moriarty represents, but what about the other major force acting upon the story? If Moriarty is Holmes fans who don't understand what's at the heart of the story, and people making inaccurate Holmes adaptations, and the manifestations of a homophobic society itself, what is Mycroft? And why does he get dragged in? Unlike the rest of the people working with Moriarty, Mycroft does so against his will. In fact, Moriarty's plans to keep John and Sherlock apart goes directly against what Mycroft really wants, to finally get them together. That's the key. Despite everything that he is forced to do, Mycroft is secretly trying to get John and Sherlock together. Mycroft is Mark and Stephen. We've talked before about how they use Mycroft as a stand-in for the writers in certain lines, but it also explains why his motivations are what they are, and why they've written him being caught up in Moriarty's grasp for now. There's more to him, though. Mycroft is essentially any writer who has wanted to tell this version of the story but felt that they couldn't for whatever reason. Billy Wilder is the next most obvious, considering that Mycroft's characterization was directly lifted from Private Life, where the character was arguably used for a similar purpose.
Get rid of it. Scuttle it. The sooner the better.
But if you wanted to, you could even see a little bit of Doyle himself in there, as well as any other writer who has tried and failed to get this story told. Before you get hopeless about this, remember that the story is structured in such a way that Moriarty must be defeated, which means that all of the forces that have kept John and Sherlock apart are going to be defeated when they finally get together. That's what it's building up to. And since Mark and Steven are both alive and well, and are in fact responsible for getting this story told, we know Mycroft will be alive to see it. This reading fits the basics of Mycroft's character as well. He is the reason Sherlock Holmes is so closed off. He made him who he is. The writers created him that way. And making him into this emotionally closed off wreck is presented as Mycroft's greatest wrongdoing. He's trying to atone for that by finally giving Sherlock his happy ending, but he keeps getting thwarted by Moriarty. He's stuck relying on the characters to get together on their own, doing his best to try to push them on the right path, but not being able to directly speak about his intentions. This is where I want to briefly talk about the unaired pilot. As you might remember, M-Theory did not exist in the pilot universe. There was no Mycroft, and the cabbie was working on his own. There was no deeper plot underscoring things, and I think that's because there didn't have to be one. I honestly believe that if the story had gone ahead in that version, John and Sherlock probably would have gotten together by the end of the first series, which would have been nice and all, but the BBC was looking for landmark LGBT representation that would make history and become culturally iconic. So they asked Mark and Steven to rewrite the story into a slow burn romance that would lead to a huge TV moment in 6 or 7 years. When they did that, Mark and Steven also realized they had the chance to really play up the fact that this would be the first adaptation to make that relationship happen. That they could emphasize how long the world had been waiting for this story to be told. And they could present the struggle of telling that story as the conflict underscoring everything else in the show. Of course, when they agreed to make the story a slow burn romance, they also agreed to hide the truth, to be a part of making the world wait just a little bit longer, to making fans like themselves who saw the romance believe they were being disappointed yet again. And so they wrote Mycroft as a morally ambiguous figure roped in with the villains, knowing that eventually he would succeed. The whole reason this level of the story is a secret is that the struggle it represents is also a secret. Most of the audience doesn't know that the writers have this big secret plan to get John and Sherlock together that they have had to lie about to achieve their ultimate victory. And so it's logical to guess that M-Theory will only be explicitly confirmed when we are really close to the reveal. So now that you know what the pieces of M-Theory represent, let's go over it again in this new context so you can see why they made the choices that they did. Let's start with Mycroft in the first episode. One of the first things he does is turn cameras away so they can't see what he's working on.
There is a security camera on the building to your left. Do you see it?
Who's this? Who's speaking?
Do you see the camera, Dr. Watson?
Yeah, I see it.
Watch. There is another camera on the building opposite you. Do you see it? And finally, at the top of the building on your right.
And what are the writers working on that they don't want the world to see yet? That they want to help John and Sherlock end up married.
What is your connection to Sherlock Holmes?
I don't have one. I barely know him. I met him yesterday.
And since yesterday you've moved in with him and now you're solving crimes together. Might we expect a happy announcement by the end of the week?
Mycroft has an in-depth understanding of the other characters and knows how to get them to do what he wants. Again, you can kind of see this as the writers guiding characters to the right path. He uses these skills to push John towards Sherlock.
Remarkable. What is?
Most people blunder around this city and all they see are streets and shops and cars. When you walk with Sherlock Holmes, you see the battlefield. You've seen it already, haven't you?
What's wrong with my hand?
You have an intermittent tremor in your left hand. Your therapist thinks it's post-traumatic stress disorder. She thinks you're haunted by memories of your military service.
Who the hell are you? How do you know that?
Fire her. She's got it the wrong way around. You're under stress right now and your hand is perfectly steady. You're not haunted by the war, Dr. Watson. You miss it. Welcome back.
At the end of the episode, Mycroft again shows up, and we see just how much Sherlock doubts his good intentions.
What are you doing here?
As ever, I'm concerned about you.
Yes, I've been hearing about your concern.
Always so aggressive. It never occurred to you that you and I belong on the same side.
Oddly enough, no.
We have more in common than you like to believe.
This indicates that Sherlock has a past reason to distrust him. M-Theory mentions that part of what might have caused this rift between Mycroft and Sherlock was the death of the other one. In the context of Mycroft as writers who have tried to get John and Sherlock together, it's interesting to think about the other one as being the private life of Sherlock Holmes, the other adaptation to try this, only to fail because the writer didn't act on his desires with the movie. This makes it hard for Sherlock to trust Mycroft, but it also gives the writers an alibi so they can keep their motivation a secret for now. After all, other adaptations have hinted at the truth without going all the way.
There will always come a time when we need Sherlock Holmes.
If this is some expression of familial sentiment...
Don't be absurd. I am not given to outbursts of brotherly compassion. You know what happened to the other one.
This detail isn't essential to this reading, but it does explain things. At the end of the episode, the writers directly tell us through Mycroft to pay attention to John and Sherlock's relationship, because one way or another, it's going to be a big deal.
Interesting, that soldier fellow. It could be the making of my brother. Or make him worse than ever. Either way, we'd better upgrade their surveillance status. Grade 3, active.
Sorry, sir. Whose status?
Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
On the flip side, though, in this episode we also have the introduction of Moriarty, who likely sponsors the cabbie serial killings just to get Sherlock's attention. John and Sherlock are only on their first case together, and already the specter of Moriarty is haunting them. They are never really free from him.
So, dim sum.
I can always predict the fortune cookies.
There you go.
Almost can. You did get shot, though.
Sorry?
In Afghanistan, there was an actual wound.
Oh, yeah, the shoulder.
Shoulder, I thought so.
No, you didn't.
The left one.
Lucky guess.
Never guess.
Yes, you do. What are you so happy about?
Moriarty.
What's Moriarty?
Absolutely no idea.
Again, this is fitting considering what Moriarty represents. Holmes and Watson have never been free. Mycroft getting roped in at the end of A Study in Pink also fits, since this plot is as far as the writers got before they had to rewrite things to keep the romance hidden. At this point, they are yet another force keeping John and Sherlock apart, despite the fact that they very much want them to end up together. Mycroft only briefly makes an appearance in the next episode when he's speaking remotely to General Shan, a Moriarty mirror. The fact that Mycroft defeats her, and specifically does so because she tries to kill who she believes are Sherlock Holmes and his romantic interest, show us that the writers aren't going to let that happen in their version. They have a certain victory in sight if they're allowed to keep telling their story.
We did not know this man would come. This Sherlock Holmes. And now your safety is compromised. I will not reveal your identity.
Things really begin to take off in The Great Game. You may or may not remember that in terms of Holmesian history, The Great Game is one of many names for the attempt of Holmes fans to reconcile inconsistencies and find the true story. That fits what's happening on this level of the narrative. Moriarty makes the mistakes so many Holmes fans have before him and assumes all Sherlock cares about are the cases.
Hello. Sexy.
Who is this?
I sent you a little puzzle just to say hi.
Since at this point he's compromised Mycroft, he forces Mycroft to keep Sherlock involved in his big elaborate game.
I can't.
Can't.
Stuff I've got on is just too big. I can't spare the time.
Never mind your usual trivia. This is of national importance.
But Moriarty is all wrong about Sherlock. Sherlock is much more human than Moriarty wants him to be, and this is demonstrated in the pool scene.
Evening. This is a turn-up, isn't it, Sherlock?
John, what the hell?
Bet you never saw this coming.
I have loved this little game of ours, playing Jim from IT, playing gay. Did you like the little touch with the underwear?
People have died.
That's what people do!
Moriarty can't stand it. He wants Sherlock to fit his ideal. If Sherlock doesn't, he'll force him to by destroying the heart he doesn't want to be there.
If you don't stop prying, I will burn you. I will burn the heart out of you.
I have been reliably informed that I don't have one.
But we both know that's not quite true.
When he hears Sherlock and John nearly talking about their feelings, he rushes back in, ready to sacrifice himself and the whole plot of the show if it keeps John and Sherlock from getting together.
I'm glad no one saw that. Hmm? You ripping my clothes off in a darkened swimming pool, people might talk.
Be with you, little else.
Sorry, boys! I'm so changeable. It is a weakness with me, but to be fair to myself, it is my only weakness. You can't be allowed to continue. You just can't.
This is the only true cliffhanger that BBC Sherlock has, and it only exists because the writers didn't know if they would be able to continue the show, to actually portray the romance like they wanted. And so they left Sherlock and John locked in a standoff with the manifestation of everything that has ever kept them apart, frozen in time, leaving us wondering if and how they would escape.
Everything I have to say has already crossed your mind.
Probably my answers crossed yours.
Like, it just makes everything make sense, this reading, and it's beautiful, and it's my favorite. And they do escape, but only for the story to be drawn out even more. So it's fitting that Irene Adler is the one who saves them.
Someone changed his mind. Question is, who?
Series 2 is the first time that Moriarty introduces a love interest to keep John and Sherlock apart, but it's not the last. And again, this fits what Moriarty represents. Irene Adler and Sherlock Holmes never have had feelings for each other. A Scandal in Bohemia ends with Irene happily running away with her husband, but people have been fixated on the idea of there being something romantic between them, despite there being much less evidence of that than there being something more to the main relationship happening in the story. Moriarty sends in Irene explicitly to fake interest in Sherlock, and to make John believe that Sherlock loves her back.
No, I was wrong about him. He did know where to look.
For what? What are you talking about?
The key code to my safe.
What was it?
Shall I tell him? My measurements.
That part resembles Ilsa's role in Private Life, again showing that this struggle is something that has been happening for quite a while. And Sherlock has never been allowed to be with John because of Moriarty and everything he represents. And maybe part of this line is him rubbing that in.
Nobody calls you. The Iceman. And the Virgin.
Mycroft's role in this episode really fits with the reading of him as the writers. First of all, he's forced to introduce Sherlock to Irene's case.
A matter has come to light of an extremely delicate and potentially criminal nature. And in this hour of need, dear brother, your name has arisen.
He then says Irene being there is interfering with his job.
How can we do anything while she has the photographs? Our hands are tied.
He also spends the episode working on a secret plan.
Bond air is go. That's decided. Check with the Coventry lot. Talk later.
Because there are people out there who want to destroy everything he's working on. And so he's going to trick everyone into thinking those people have won.
There's going to be a bomb on a passenger jet. The British and American governments know about it, but rather than expose the source of their information, they're going to let it happen. The plane will blow up. Coventry all over again. The wheel turns. Nothing is ever new.
Even though in reality, there are no casualties.
The Coventry conundrum. What do you think of my solution? The flight of the dead.
Plane blows up midair. Mission accomplished for the terrorists. Hundreds of casualties, but nobody dies.
Bond air is symbolic of TJLC, and the writer's willingness to lie to us if they know they can secure an ultimate victory. Mycroft's plan is nearly ruined by Moriarty, just like it actually was in Private Life. But ironically, knowing Moriarty is behind everything allows Sherlock to outsmart Irene and salvage things for Mycroft.
They are, brother. Hope the contents make up for any inconvenience I may have caused you tonight.
I'm certain they will.
And so the plan continues, and Mycroft ends the episode trying to get John to guess about his brother's heart, simultaneously telling us that we should be asking the same questions.
He's not like that. He doesn't feel things that way, I don't think.
My brother has the brain of a scientist or a philosopher, yet he elects to be a detective. What might we deduce about his heart?
But still, Mycroft can only hint for now. Remember also that in the middle of this episode, Sherlock realizes that John loves him back, but he feels like he can't act on those feelings because, surprise, Moriarty is still around. Looking at the show on this level, the Reichenbach Fall has a lot going on. I've been constantly dropping hints that all of the references to the media in this show are important, and I can finally explain why. The press appeared for the first time in Belgravia just before Sherlock was introduced to Irene's case.
There's a lot of press outside, guys.
Well, they won't be interested in us.
Yeah, that was before you were an internet phenomenon. A couple of them specifically wanted photographs of you two.
God's sake.
Newspapers again briefly show up in the Hounds of Baskerville when John mentions there being another article about Sherlock, and Sherlock is annoyed about it.
Another photo of you with the...
We're already getting hints not to take things said about Sherlock in the press seriously. This is about the interviews where they are forced to lie. It gets a lot more direct in TRF. Sherlock's fame skyrockets, probably as a result of Moriarty and Magnuson working together to ensure his cases are heavily featured in the news, and the press are obsessed with John and Sherlock's relationship.
Boffin Sherlock Holmes.
Everybody gets one.
What?
Tabloid nickname. Subo. Nasty Nick. Shouldn't worry, I'll probably get one soon.
Page 5, column 6, first sentence.
Why is it always the hat photograph?
Bachelor John Watson.
What the hat is it anyway?
Bachelor? What the hell are they implying?
Is it a cat? Why's it got two fronts?
It's a deer stalker. Frequently seen in the company of Bachelor
deer
John
with a hat. What are you going to do, throw it?
Confirmed Bachelor John Watson.
When John hears this, he doesn't ask how they could think that, which would have provided the perfect opportunity for the writers to address this idea and dismiss it. John instead says,
Okay, this is too much. We need to be more careful.
Something needs to be carefully kept out of the newspapers for now. Something related to the speculation about their relationship. When they face the press before heading to Moriarty's trial, John shields Sherlock the same way Watson has always done in his writing.
Ready?
Yes.
And then we get Kitty, who again presents a perfect opportunity for the writers to dismiss the idea that John and Sherlock have feelings for each other. Kitty first approaches Sherlock pretending to be a fan, but as we'll see in just a second, that adds to the commentary about Holmes fans getting it wrong. She asks if John and Sherlock are just platonic, and Sherlock remains silent.
No. I'm just saving you the trouble of asking. No, I won't give you an interview. No, I don't want the money.
You and John Watson, just platonic? Could I put you down for a no there as well?
Knowing what that means, she offers to set the record straight.
There's all sorts of gossip in the press about you. Sooner or later, you're going to need someone on your side. Someone to set the record straight.
And Sherlock says she repels him.
I see someone who's hungry. I don't see smart. And I definitely don't see trustworthy. But I'll give you a quote if you like. 3 little words. You repel me.
Keep in mind, this is about someone pretending to be a Holmes fan who is only there to try to straighten things out. People trying to use this relationship to their advantage, only bringing it up to dismiss it, or so they can set the record straight, are being presented as repulsive. Not only that, but she ends up working for Moriarty. It's all related to the writers correcting other Holmes fans, because part of Moriarty's goal in this episode is to spread misinformation about who Sherlock is, to present a false Sherlock Holmes to the public, and he's only allowed to do that because of Mycroft.
She has really done her homework, Miss Riley. It's things that only someone close to Sherlock could know. Have you seen your brother's address book lately? 2 names, yours and mine, and Moriarty didn't get this stuff from me.
John.
So how does it work then, your relationship? You go out for a coffee now and then, hey? You and Jim? Your own brother, and you blabbed about his entire life to this maniac.
Mycroft lets him paint this false version, going along with how they've included things like the high-functioning sociopath line and other things like it, because they have no choice. It's the only way to keep this going. He tries to warn John of what's happening, but it doesn't do any good.
You read this stuff.
Caught my eye. Saturday, they're doing a big expose.
I'd love to know where she got her information.
Someone called Brooke. Recognize the name?
John later yells at Mycroft for allowing this to happen, and he seems genuinely remorseful.
I never dreamt.
This is what you were trying to tell me, isn't it? Watch his back, because I've made a mistake. So, one big lie. Sherlock's a fraud. But people will swallow it because the rest of it's true. Moriarty wanted Sherlock destroyed, right? And you have given him the perfect ammunition.
John, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Tell him, would you?
I really don't think they've enjoyed doing this. We can see this symbolism playing out in the Diogenes Club as well, where Mycroft must work in total silence to appear to maintain tradition.
Right. Am I invisible? Can you actually see me? Ah, thanks, gents. I've been asked to meet Mycroft home. What the hell?
Tradition, John. Our traditions define us.
So total silence is traditional, is it?
Mycroft will later say in The Abominable Bride, just after they again bring up that absolute silence, that their way of life must change.
Our way of life is under threat from an invisible enemy, one that hovers at our elbow on a daily basis. These enemies are everywhere, undetected, and unstoppable.
These enemies, how are we to defeat them if you won't tell us about them?
We don't defeat them. We most certainly lose to them.
Why?
Because they are right and we are wrong.
They're planning to break the silence. Moriarty shows up on TVs in this episode more than once. Firstly, he controls the TV in the hotel rooms.
Cable network.
Every hotel bedroom has a personalized TV screen. And every person has their pressure point. Someone that they want to protect from harm.
And then he forces Sherlock to watch the story of Sir Beaustelat.
Hello. Are you ready for the story? This is the story of Sir Beaustelat. So, one of the knights went to King Arthur and said, I don't believe Sir Beaustelat's stories. He's just a big old liar who makes things up to make himself look good. But that wasn't the end of Sir Beaustelat's problem. No. That wasn't the final problem.
When they find Moriarty at Kitty's apartment, he insists he's just an actor. He's not a villain. He's only telling stories that are suitable for children.
He paid me. I needed the work. I'm an actor. I was out of work.
Sherlock, you better.
I'm on TV. I'm on kids' TV. I'm the storyteller. I'm the storyteller. It's on DVD.
You know how people always worry about kids when people want to tell stories about gay romance? The BBC writers present the people making those other Holmes adaptations as the central antagonists. There's also the fact that Moriarty uses Sherlock's desire for everything to be clever, for the choices made in the story to matter, against him to take away his hope.
Good. You got that too.
But now that it's up here, I can use it to alter all the records. I can kill Rich Brooke and bring back Jim Moriarty.
No. This is too easy. This is too easy. There is no key. Doofus! I knew you'd fall for it. That's your weakness. You always want everything to be clever.
This is them addressing writers who hint at a romance only to mislead people. It's an action only the worst villains would take. On the roof, Moriarty again mentions newspapers and how we shouldn't believe what we read in them. He's in control of what's being said there.
Genius detective proved to be a fraud. I read it in the paper, so it must be true. I love newspapers. Fairy tales. And pretty grim ones, too.
They really warn us not to trust the interviews, even in the show. All he wants to force Sherlock to do is to continue being a part of his version of the story.
Your only 3 friends in the world will die. Unless
I kill myself. Complete your story.
You gotta admit that's sexier.
Moriarty fakes his death, but because John and Sherlock still aren't free to be together, we should know that he's not really dead from that alone. There's also the fact that Mycroft is involved in keeping Moriarty alive. The writers are drawing out the secret. They know they'll win eventually, but for now they have to keep lying about their true intent. Now that Moriarty's role has been truly established, he can fall into the background. So he's working behind the scenes, causing the events of Series 3, the same way he always has been. But now Sherlock, John, and the audience don't know it. But he's still pulling all of the same tricks. For example, Moriarty is the reason that John gets engaged to someone else. His fiancée is one of his agents. Knowing what Moriarty really represents, that says a lot about what Mark and Stephen think about John's marriage, even in the original stories. That it was yet another thing being forced on these characters because of a homophobic society. Moriarty is also responsible for getting Sherlock back in the news and his name cleared just when he needs it to be.
After extensive police investigations, Richard Brooke did indeed prove to be the creation of James Moriarty.
Unprecedented scenes, there was uproar in court as Sherlock Holmes was vindicated and cleared of all suspicion.
Sadly, all this comes too late for the detective, who became something of a celebrity 2 years ago.
Questions are now being asked as to why police let matters get so far.
Again, the villains are in control of the media. The media is an enemy that John and Sherlock need to overcome. In this episode, Mycroft, representing the writers, is forced to watch Sherlock suffer because he can't give himself away yet.
Why didn't you intervene sooner?
I couldn't risk giving myself away, could I? Would have ruined everything.
Again, they're telling us they have a secret plan, but they can't act on it yet. We also get very blatant imagery with Mycroft in this episode. The camera tricks the audience into thinking that Sherlock and Mycroft are playing chess, when really they're playing Operation.
Boring. Your move.
The show isn't about logic. It's about the writers slowly, gently drawing out Sherlock's heart.
Now.
Oh, bugger.
Oopsie. Can't handle a broken heart. How very telling.
Moriarty puts John in danger again in this episode, but only so Sherlock will expose himself to the cameras watching.
John! John!
John!
John.
Which reminds me, I kind of glossed all of those cameras in Baker Street. I hinted last time that all of the cameras in Baker Street are a reference to all of the people actually watching Sherlock and John's lives unfold. Us. The cameras are there to imply that there are no real secrets. If John and Sherlock get together, even safely in their home, everyone will know. This kind of kills the idea that they've already been secretly together in the past. So when we see them finally get together, it will truly be the first time. Back to the media, Sherlock and John go out to face the press again at the end of the episode. This time after Sherlock shakes off his emotions, saying he needs to go be Sherlock Holmes.
I asked you for one more miracle. I asked you to stop being dead.
I heard you. Anyway, time to go and be Sherlock Holmes.
They're putting on an act here, and we fade away to Magnuson watching Sherlock exposing his pressure point on a loop. Magnuson knows the truth about Sherlock, but he only uses it to further his own ends. He has no intent of letting them be together. He's also presented as predatory and generally gross, but more on that in a minute. The Sign of Three was the writer's time to shine. It was when most of us caught on to the idea that something was really happening here, that it really was all building up to something. Of course, it still couldn't be stated outright, and that's reflected in the fact that two people working for Moriarty, Mary and Janine, are both present at the wedding. Even over the phone, Mycroft can only hint and try to lead Sherlock where he wants him to be.
So, this is it then. The big day. I suppose I'll be seeing a lot more of you from now on.
What do you mean?
Just like old times.
No, I don't understand.
Well, it's the end of an era, isn't it? John and Mary. Domestic bliss.
No, I prefer to think of it as the beginning of a new chapter. What?
Nothing.
I have that silence. What?
Well, I'd better let you get back to it. You have a big speech or something, don't you?
What?
Cakes. Karaoke.
Mingling.
Mycroft.
This is what people
Do, Sherlock. They get married.
I warned you. Don't.
Get involved.
Involved, I'm not involved.
No.
John asked me to be his best man. How could I say no?
Absolutely.
Not involved.
I believe you. Really, I do. Have a lovely day, and do give the happy couple my best.
I will.
Oh, by the way, Sherlock.
Do you remember Redbeard?
I'm not a child anymore, Mycroft.
No, of course you're not.
Enjoy not getting involved, Sherlock.
But in Sherlock's mind, we get major hints of what the writers are planning through Mycroft. At the end of his speech, Sherlock starts to realize that John was interested in him, and that he could be with him if he just made his feelings clear. And the person who wanted him to have this realization, the person leading him through it, telling him and us that all of those details aren't coincidences, is none other than Mycroft.
For one person to be in both groups could be a coincidence.
Oh, Sherlock. What do we say about coincidence?
The universe is rarely so lazy.
He tells us that someone is going to great lengths to plan something.
So, the balance of probability is?
Someone went to great lengths to find out something about this wedding.
What great length?
They lied, assumed false identities.
Which suggests?
Criminal intent.
Also suggests?
Intelligence, planning.
Clearly.
You might think that's unrelated, but remember that Jonathan Small and James Sholto operate as Mycroft and Moriarty mirrors at the end of the episode. The Mayfly Man was going to great lengths to put an end to Moriarty's stand-in.
I should have killed him quicker. I shouldn't have tried to be clever.
This is, in fact, a hint about the writer's plan to have John and Sherlock be together. Mycroft is still there on screen when Sherlock makes his confession to John.
Narrow it down. No! No! Not you! Not you!
You. It's always you. John Watson, you keep me right.
The two Mycrofts on screen show the two sides to his character motivation. The side forced to keep John and Sherlock apart, and the side that wants them to get together, which again relates back to our writers. Mary comes up with a plot contrivance to keep them apart though, and because she's working for Moriarty, even this can be traced back to him. John and Sherlock could have been together 100 times over by now if not for Moriarty's influence. That's the whole point. They could have been together the whole time if everyone weren't getting it wrong. Love them for doing this. Thank you. As you probably remember, there's a lot going on with M-Theory in his last vow. And it's because after the sign of 3, keeping John and Sherlock apart is more difficult than ever. Moriarty has a lot of pieces in play. So the woman Sherlock starts dating explicitly so he can break into an office, but has the consequence of convincing John that Sherlock is a straight sociopath all over again, is working for Moriarty. It always seems to go back to him. She even puts more lies about Sherlock's sexuality in the press, which is extremely pointed.
I'm buying a cottage. I made a lot of money out of you, mister.
We're being reminded in this scene that all of the interviews about Sherlock's sexuality are total lies.
I exploited the fact of our connection.
When?
Hmm?
Just once would have been nice. And also, I have an interview with the One Show and I haven't made it up yet.
Magnuson is properly introduced in this episode, and it's telling that this series' villain is a sexual, predatory, and repulsive media mogul.
This is blackmail.
Of course it isn't blackmail.
This is ownership. You do not own me.
The writers really don't like the press. I mean, you've read the interviews. You know they only bring up John and Sherlock's relationship so they can mock the people who see it. Magnuson even uses Sherlock's feelings for John as one of his key pressure points.
Well, look how you care about John Watson. Your damsel in distress.
You put me in a fire for leverage.
And remember that Magnuson is yet another villain in the media who plants secret conspiracies only to trick people.
Let me show you the Appledore vaults. The entrance to my vaults. This is where I keep you all.
Okay, so where are the vaults then?
Vaults? What vaults? There are no vaults beneath this building. They're all in here. The Appledore vaults are my mind palace.
And he's a villain. And again, at this point, Mycroft is powerless to stop this. If someone tries to stop the interviews, they'll be stopping him.
Magnuson is not your business.
Oh, you mean he's yours?
You may consider him under my protection.
I consider you under his thumb.
If you go against Magnuson, then you will find yourself going against me.
Okay, I'll let you know if I notice.
But secretly, Mycroft is waiting for the right opportunity to stop him.
Mycroft has been looking for this opportunity for a long time. He'll be a very, very proud big brother.
The writers plan for these interviews to stop eventually. For now, they describe Magnuson and what he represents as a necessary evil.
I'm still curious, though. He's hardly your usual kind of puzzle. Why do you hate him?
Because he attacks people who are different and preys on their secrets. Why don't you?
He never causes too much damage to anyone important. He's far too intelligent for that. He's a businessman, that's all. And occasionally useful to us. A necessary evil. Not a dragon for you to slay.
When Moriarty finally does return, given everything you know about what he represents, is there anything more fitting than him suddenly taking control of every TV screen in the country?
Who's that?
Did you miss me?
Did you miss me?
Did you miss me? Did you miss me?
Did you miss me?
How is this possible?
We don't know. It's on every screen in the country, every screen simultaneously.
Has the Prime Minister been told? And Mycroft?
But that's not possible. That is simply not possible.
He's still trying to get his version of the story told, to ensure that it's the only version of the story that is ever told. But the writers have already hinted to us that Sherlock can defeat him.
On balance, you have more utility closer to home.
Utility? How do I have utility?
Here be dragons.
As it turns out, you're needed.
For God's sake, make up your mind. He needs me this time.
Did you miss me? 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 Did you miss me?
England.
As you can probably imagine, the fact that Moriarty represents everything that has kept Sherlock Holmes and John Watson apart since the beginning was only enhanced when they took the story back to the Victorian era. Even the mention of Moriarty in this episode throws off everything Sherlock is trying to do.
Gun in the mouth. Bullet through the brain. Back of the head blown clean off. How could he survive?
She, you mean?
I'm sorry?
Not he, she.
Yes, yes, of course.
Holmes.
This episode is Sherlock trying to tell his own Holmes story, on multiple levels, including at the end where it's hinted that BBC Sherlock is Holmes' idealized version of what should happen. And Moriarty ruins it, just like he always has. The writers also get very blatant with their intent through Mycroft in this episode. They talk about an enemy that is everywhere, but one that will most certainly win because their cause is right.
But these enemies, how are we to defeat them if you won't tell us about them?
We don't defeat them. We most certainly lose to them.
Why?
Because they are right and we are wrong.
When the brides are unveiled, Mycroft is invoked again, when Sherlock says the invisible army must win.
Every great cause has martyrs. Every war has suicide missions, and make no mistake, this is war. One half of the human race at war with the other. The invisible army hovering at our elbow, tending to our homes, raising our children, ignored, patronized, disregarded, not allowed so much as a vote. But an army nonetheless, ready to rise up in the best of causes, to put right an injustice as old as humanity itself. So you see, Watson, Mycroft was right. This is a war we must lose.
Again, they're talking to us. If that wasn't enough, Mycroft in this episode is associated both with Billy Wilder.
Thank you, Wilder.
And with Christopher Mallis, who you might remember was the guy from the Geek Interpreter case, the one with the theories that started coming true.
Also, Mr. Mallis to see you, Mr. Holmes.
We have this website. It explains the true meaning of comic books, because people miss a lot of the themes. But then all the comic books started coming true.
Oh. Interesting.
When Sherlock faces Moriarty, he says he's summoned him to get the truth. But Moriarty doesn't care about the truth. He never has.
Why? What you want?
You chose to come here.
Not true, you know that's not true. What do you want, Sherlock?
The truth.
That
Truth's boring.
Instead, he wants to keep Sherlock focused on him, on the cases.
You got what was coming to him.
But you couldn't have killed him.
Oh, so what? Doesn't matter. Stop it. Stop. The bride put a gun in her mouth and shot the back of her head off, and then she came back. Impossible. But she did it. And you need to know how. How? Don't you? It's tearing your world apart not knowing.
On the fact that he's never going to be with John.
I saw you die. Why aren't you dead?
Because it's not the fall that kills you, Sherlock. Of all people, you should know that. It's not the fall. It's never the fall. It's the landing.
He sends Sherlock back to reality, where Mycroft is in anguish seeing everything Sherlock has had to go through, and says it's all his fault.
I'll always be there for you. This was my fault.
Reading him as the writers, it really is. When Sherlock very nearly resolves that everything is fine, that John will work against Mary with him, Moriarty shows up to remind him that he's only dreaming. He and John will never be together.
If one disregards the ghost, there is only one suspect. Isn't that right, Lady Carmichael? One small detail doesn't quite make sense to me, however. Why engage me to prevent a murder you intended to commit?
Doesn't quite make sense. Doesn't quite make sense. Of course it doesn't make sense. It's not real. Oh, Sherlock. Peekaboo.
No, not you.
Is this silly enough for you yet? Gothic enough? Mad enough? Even for you? It doesn't make sense, Sherlock. Because it's not real. None of it.
What's he talking about?
This is all in your mind.
Sherlock. Holmes!
You're dreaming.
And Sherlock's worst nightmare is being stuck with Moriarty in the place where it all began, the Reichenbach Falls.
Too deep, Sherlock, way too deep. Congratulations, you'll be the first man in history to be buried in his own mind palace.
Knowing what Moriarty represents gives this scene even more of a punch. He's telling Sherlock that he'll never be free to be with John, that the story will always be the same, that nothing will ever change it.
This is how we end, you and I. Always here, always together. Oh, you think you're so big and strong, Sherlock? Not with me. I am your weakness. I keep you down! Every time you stumble, every time you fail, when you're weak, I am there! No, don't try to fight it. Lie back and lose! Shall we go over together? It has to be together, doesn't it? At the end, it's always just you and me!
But the story does change.
Professor, if you wouldn't mind stepping away from my friend, I do believe he finds your attention a shade annoying.
That's not fair, there's two of you.
There's always two of us. Don't you read the Strand?
Again, this is the writers directly telling us that they're planning on changing the story. That this time it will end with John and Sherlock together. Just the two of them, as it always should have been. And Moriarty and everything he stands for will finally be defeated.
It was my turn.
Good, sir.
It really is a symbolic glimpse of what is to come. Sherlock wakes up and Mycroft tries to be kind to him, but Sherlock is just angry that Mycroft hasn't done more to protect him.
Sherlock, promise me.
What are you still doing here? Shouldn't you be off getting me a pardon or something? Like a proper big brother?
And Sherlock has a point, and the writers know it. Even after all of this, they still have to hide their true intentions. They just try to keep John and Sherlock as close as they can.
Dr. Watson. Look after him. Please.
Knowing what these characters represent also gives us some clue as to what will happen next. To begin with though, if some Setlock pictures were correct, Culverton Smith has a television show, making him yet another villain involved in the media, the last to face before the final problem. And since that title is official now, I don't feel bad talking about it. And it is so appropriate. Defeating Moriarty and everything he stands for, Holmes fans who don't understand Holmes at all, the adaptations that have kept the romance from happening, and the manifestation of everything that has kept John and Sherlock apart for 130 years is the final problem that has to be resolved before John and Sherlock can be together. And we know that Moriarty must be defeated. And he will either be defeated because John and Sherlock get together, or their union will make defeating him effortless. Because once they're together, Moriarty has absolutely no power. They've written it that way. Speaking of the fact that they have the control to write things certain ways, the writers didn't set it up so that their stand-in has to die, because they don't have to die in the real world to get this story told. What has to happen is that it has to be revealed that they've been forced to do things against their will, things that have kept John and Sherlock apart romantically, but then redeem themselves by helping John and Sherlock get rid of Moriarty, because that's exactly what Mark and Steven will be doing in Series 4. Mycroft won't die because of what he represents. Mark and Steven want writers and Holmes fans like them to finally have a victory. Remember, they're doing this to correct everyone else, and so Mycroft will survive to enjoy that victory. But like I said, he will let Sherlock go. Then Sherlock and John will finally be free to have their story, without all these complicated plots to keep things hidden. So in Series 4, M-Theory will be both revealed and resolved, because it's only ever been there to hint at the plot of getting this story told. That's what it all means. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. I've been looking forward to making it for such a long time now, and I really hope I explained everything in a way that made sense and made you as excited about this level of the story as I am. Like, they've been directly telling us that this is going on the entire time. That's the basis of everything. It's just so cool that they did that. It makes M-Theory just really exciting. Maybe you'll even go back and reread it or rewatch some of these scenes in this new context. At the very least, you'll now be on the lookout for these characters and these motifs in the next series. Here I reference that 2010 interview, as well as both M-Theory and Trust and Gatus Operation John Lucas Go, both of which are by Loudest Subtext and Television and can be found through the link below. We are really close to Series 4 now. All that's left to TJLC beforehand are 3 recaps. One of the series from Sherlock's point of view, one from John's point of view, and a final one with all of the materials and information we've gotten throughout the hiatus, including the trailers, reminding you why we can expect the reveal to be happening now. Although, like we'll talk about when we get there, after that last trailer, now being the time is kind of a moot point. It's happening, guys. It's happening. Woo! Champagne poppers that I don't have. Anyway, until then, I hope you're looking forward to the final 3 episodes before Series 4. Thank you so much for watching, and get ready to believe.